What if I told you that 30 years ago, one of humanity's greatest scientific minds looked into the future and saw something so terrifying that he spent his final years desperately trying to warn us about it? What if I told you that Carl Sagan, the man who helped us fall in love with the cosmos, who showed us the beauty of our pale blue dot, who inspired millions to wonder about the stars, became haunted by a vision of humanity's potential downfall, not from asteroids or alien invasion, but from something far more insidious, our own willful ignorance in an age of unprecedented technological power? Right now, as you watch this video on a device that connects you instantly to the sum of human knowledge, you are living in the exact future that Carl Sagan feared most, and most people don't even realize how close we've come to the edge of the abyss he saw approaching. Imagine a civilization that has learned to split atoms, but has forgotten how to split fact from fiction. Picture a society that can send messages across the globe in milliseconds, but cannot distinguish between reliable information and manufactured lies. Envision a world where people carry supercomputers in their pockets while consulting horoscopes for life decisions, where vaccines developed through centuries of scientific progress are rejected based on social media posts, where the same species that landed on the moon seriously debates whether the Earth is flat. This isn't science fiction. This is the dangerous future that Sagan predicted with chilling accuracy in 1995, and we are living in it right now. Dr. Carl Edward Sagan spent his career helping humanity understand our cosmic significance, but in his final years he became increasingly concerned about our cosmic responsibilities. He realized that the same scientific method that revealed the age of the universe, the structure of DNA, and the mechanics of climate change was under assault from forces that he saw as fundamentally threatening to human civilization. He understood something that most people still haven't grasped. We have created a world utterly dependent on scientific discoveries while simultaneously fostering distrust of the methods that produced those discoveries. Every aspect of modern life depends on scientific understanding that most people take for granted while rejecting the process that made it possible. Your GPS navigation system works because Einstein's theories of relativity are programmed into satellites. Yet many people dismiss relativity as just a theory. Your smartphone operates through quantum mechanical principles that govern semiconductor behavior. Yet quantum physics is often dismissed as too weird to be real. Your morning weather forecast comes from atmospheric models based on fluid dynamics and thermodynamics. Yet climate science based on the same principles is treated as controversial opinion rather than physical reality. This disconnect between technological dependence and scientific literacy represents what Sagan identified as humanity's greatest existential threat. We have arranged our civilization so that nearly everything we depend on, transportation, communication, medicine, agriculture, energy production, even democracy itself, through electronic voting, requires deep scientific and technological understanding, yet we have simultaneously arranged things so that almost no one understands the science and technology upon which everything depends. Sagan called this a combustible mixture of ignorance and power that was eventually going to blow up in our faces. But the danger runs deeper than simple ignorance. Sagan warned about the rise of what he called pseudo-science, ideas that wear the costume of science but reject its methods, conclusions that sound scientific but avoid scientific scrutiny, claims that appeal to our desire for simple answers in a complex world. Pseudoscience thrives because it tells people what they want to hear, rather than what evidence actually shows. It promises easy solutions to difficult problems, confirms existing beliefs rather than challenging them, and provides the comfort of certainty in an uncertain world. The warning signs that Sagan identified are everywhere around us today. He predicted that awesome technological powers would become concentrated in the hands of very few people, while the public lost the ability to understand or question those technologies. Look around. A handful of tech companies control the information flow for billions of people. Artificial intelligence systems make decisions that affect millions of lives. And genetic engineering capabilities exist that can alter the fundamental building blocks of life itself. Yet public understanding of these technologies remains superficial at best. Sagan foresaw that people would lose the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority. Social media algorithms now determine what information most people see, creating echo chambers that reinforce existing beliefs while filtering out challenging ideas. Political and corporate leaders make decisions about complex scientific issues: climate policy, pandemic response, nuclear energy, genetic modification, while the public lacks the scientific literacy needed to evaluate their claims or hold them accountable for their choices. Most chilling of all, Sagan predicted that our critical faculties would decline to the point where we could no longer distinguish between what feels good and what's true. He saw a future where people would clutch crystals and consult horoscopes while sliding almost without noticing back into superstition and darkness. Sound familiar? We live in an age where people reject vaccines developed through rigorous scientific testing while trusting unregulated supplements marketed through testimonials, where climate science backed by decades of research and mountains of evidence is dismissed while conspiracy theories spread faster than facts, where the same people who use satellite navigation systems to find coffee shops reject the satellite data showing planetary warming. The tragedy is that this dangerous future was entirely preventable. Sagan wasn't a pessimist. He was a scientist issuing an evidence-based warning about where current trends were leading. He believed deeply in humanity's capacity for reason, wonder, and wisdom. He spent his life showing that science doesn't diminish human significance, but reveals it on the grandest possible scale. He demonstrated that scientific understanding enhances rather than destroys the sense of meaning and connection that humans naturally seek. But he also understood that these benefits of scientific thinking are not automatic. They require cultivation, education, and constant vigilance against the forces of ignorance and manipulation. The stakes couldn't be higher because the challenges we face as a species, climate change, biodiversity loss, pandemic diseases, nuclear proliferation, artificial intelligence safety, genetic engineering ethics, all require scientific thinking to address effectively. These are not problems that can be solved through wishful thinking, political rhetoric, or appeal to traditional authorities. They require understanding of complex systems, evaluation of evidence, acceptance of uncertainty, and the ability to change our minds when new data emerges. They require exactly the kind of scientific literacy and critical thinking that Sagan saw disappearing from public discourse. The most insidious aspect of the dangerous future Carl Sagan warned about isn't the presence of ignorance. Ignorance has always existed and can be educated away with patience and effort. The real danger lies in the active cultivation of anti-scientific thinking, the systematic undermining of the methods that have given us our greatest insights into reality, the weaponization of doubt against established knowledge, while promoting unfounded certainty about convenient alternatives. Sagan saw this coming decades before it reached its current intensity, recognizing that certain forces in society had discovered they could profit from confusion, gain power from people's scientific illiteracy, and maintain control by keeping the public unable to evaluate evidence independently. He understood that in a scientifically literate society, many forms of manipulation become impossible. You cannot sell worthless medical treatments to people who understand how clinical trials work. You cannot promote environmental policies that ignore climate science to people who understand atmospheric physics. You cannot maintain economic systems that depend on infinite growth to people who understand thermodynamics and ecological limits. You cannot start wars based on manufactured evidence to people who know how to evaluate sources and demand verification. Scientific literacy isn't just about understanding the natural world. It's about empowering people to make informed decisions about their lives, their society, and their future. This is why the assault on scientific thinking has been so systematic and well-funded. Tobacco companies pioneered the techniques in the 1950s and 1960s, discovering that they didn't need to prove cigarettes were safe. They just needed to create enough doubt about the evidence of harm to prevent effective regulation. The strategy was simple: hire scientists to produce studies that contradicted the mainstream findings, amplify uncertainty about established facts, promote the false idea that scientific questions are matters of opinion rather than evidence, and frame the debate as a battle between competing authorities rather than a process of investigating reality. These same techniques were later applied to acid rain, ozone depletion, and climate change, with devastating effectiveness. The pattern is always the same: manufacture controversy where scientific consensus exists, present false balance between established science and fringe alternatives, exploit the public's limited understanding of how science actually works, and promote the dangerous idea that all opinions are equally valid, regardless of their evidentiary support. The result is exactly what Sagan predicted: a society where people become unable to distinguish between what feels good and what's true, where comfort and convenience matter more than accuracy and evidence. But the problem goes beyond corporate manipulation. Sagan also warned about the dumbing down of American discourse through media systems that prioritize entertainment over information, that reduce complex issues to sound bites and slogans, that reward sensationalism over substance. He was horrified by the trend toward shorter and shorter attention spans, worrying that 30-second soundbites were becoming 10-second soundbites, making nuanced discussion of complex topics nearly impossible through mainstream channels. Social media has accelerated this trend beyond anything Sagan could have imagined. Information now travels at the speed of emotion rather than the pace of careful consideration. Complex scientific findings are reduced to viral memes that often distort or completely misrepresent the original research. Algorithms designed to maximize engagement naturally amplify content that provokes strong emotional reactions, regardless of its accuracy or social value. The result is an information environment that actively rewards misinformation while penalizing the kind of careful, nuanced thinking that real understanding requires. The consequences extend far beyond individual decision-making. Democracy itself depends on an informed citizenry capable of evaluating competing claims about policy options. When people lack the scientific literacy needed to understand the issues they're voting on, climate change, pandemic response, nuclear energy, genetic modification, artificial intelligence regulation, democratic decision-making becomes impossible in any meaningful sense. Instead of informed deliberation about policy options, we get tribal warfare between competing authorities, with people choosing sides based on identity and emotion rather than evidence and reasoning. Sagan was particularly concerned about the concentration of technological power in the hands of people who themselves might lack the scientific understanding needed to use that power wisely. He worried about a future where political leaders would make decisions about nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and planetary-scale environmental systems without the scientific literacy needed to grasp the implications of their choices. Look around. How many of our current leaders demonstrate genuine understanding of the scientific issues they're making policies about? How many can explain the greenhouse effect, discuss the principles of vaccine development, or describe how artificial intelligence systems actually work? The danger becomes existential when we consider the types of challenges that advanced civilizations inevitably face. Climate change isn't just an environmental issue, it's a test of whether our species can use scientific evidence to coordinate global action before natural consequences become catastrophic. Pandemic diseases test whether we can trust scientific expertise over political convenience when lives are at stake. Nuclear weapons test whether we can manage technologies that could end human civilization. Artificial intelligence development tests whether we can anticipate and mitigate risks from technologies more powerful than anything in human history. Each of these challenges requires exactly the kind of scientific thinking that Sagan saw disappearing from public discourse. The ability to think in long time scales, to evaluate probabilities rather than dealing only in certainties, to change policies based on new evidence, to make decisions based on what reality is telling us rather than what we wish were true. These are not optional skills for an advanced technological civilization. They are requirements for survival. Yet instead of developing these capabilities, we seem to be moving in the opposite direction. Public trust in scientific institutions has declined, even as scientific understanding of critical issues has improved. Political polarization has infected areas of knowledge that should be politically neutral. Economic interests have learned to manufacture doubt about any scientific findings that threaten short-term profits. Educational systems have failed to produce citizens capable of thinking scientifically about the complex challenges they face. If you're recognizing elements of our current reality in Sagan's warnings, if you're seeing how prescient his concerns were about the direction our civilization was heading, then you understand why this message matters so urgently today. This isn't just another YouTube channel talking about science. This is a community dedicated to developing the kind of cosmic perspective and scientific literacy that might be humanity's best hope for navigating the dangerous future we've stumbled into. When you subscribe, you're not just clicking a button, you're joining the effort to cultivate the kind of thinking that advanced civilizations need to survive their own technological power. Tell me in the comments, where do you see Sagan's warnings playing out most clearly in today's world? What gives you hope that we might still choose wisdom over willful ignorance? The most heartbreaking aspect of the dangerous future Carl Sagan warned about is not that it was inevitable, but that it was entirely preventable through education, public engagement with science, and the cultivation of what he called the candle of reason in an age of gathering darkness. Sagan believed deeply that humans are naturally curious, naturally inclined toward scientific thinking, naturally capable of wonder and rational inquiry when given the proper tools and encouragement. He saw scientific literacy not as an elite privilege, but as a basic human right, essential for meaningful participation in a democratic society increasingly shaped by technological choices. Yet instead of building the kind of educational system that could produce scientifically literate citizens, we have systematically undermined science education while increasing our dependence on scientific technologies. Students learn to use smartphones and computers without understanding the physics that makes them possible. They benefit from medical treatments without grasping the biological principles behind them. They live in buildings designed using engineering principles they never encounter. Eat food produced through agricultural science they remain ignorant of and rely on transportation systems based on chemistry and materials. Science they know nothing about. This educational failure creates exactly the kind of vulnerability that Sagan warned would make civilizations susceptible to manipulation, pseudoscience, and ultimately civilizational collapse. People who don't understand how knowledge is created cannot distinguish between reliable and unreliable sources of information. Citizens who don't grasp the logic of scientific reasoning cannot participate meaningfully in democratic decisions about scientific issues. Consumers who don't understand how evidence works become easy targets for anyone selling convenient lies disguised as hidden truths. The problem is compounded by what Sagan identified as a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of scientific knowledge itself. Many people think of science as a collection of facts to be memorized, rather than a method of inquiry to be practiced. They expect scientific knowledge to provide the same kind of absolute certainty that authoritarian systems promise, not understanding that the provisional nature of scientific conclusions, the willingness to change based on new evidence, is actually science's greatest strength, not a weakness to be exploited by those promoting alternative authorities. This misunderstanding makes people vulnerable to pseudoscientific claims that offer false certainty about complex issues. Alternative medicine promoters exploit this by promising miracle cures while dismissing the uncertainty and complexity that real medical science acknowledges. Climate change deniers exploit it by demanding impossible levels of certainty about future projections while promoting absolute confidence in convenient alternatives. Conspiracy theorists exploit it by offering simple explanations for complex events while attacking the nuanced, evidence-based analyses that real investigation produces. Sagan was particularly concerned about the way mass media systems had evolved to exploit, rather than educate, public scientific understanding. He watched as television programming shifted away from educational content toward entertainment that often promoted anti-scientific thinking. He saw how news media began presenting scientific issues as political controversies, giving equal time to established scientific findings and fringe alternatives as if they were equally valid competing opinions, rather than dramatically different in their evidentiary support. The rise of social media has accelerated these trends beyond anything Sagan could have anticipated. Information systems designed to maximize user engagement naturally promote content that confirms existing beliefs and provokes emotional reactions, regardless of accuracy. Scientific findings that require careful explanation and nuanced interpretation cannot compete with conspiracy theories that offer simple villains and easy solutions. Evidence-based conclusions that acknowledge uncertainty and complexity lose out to confident assertions that promise absolute truth while demanding only belief rather than understanding. The result is exactly what Sagan feared: a society where people lose the ability to think scientifically about the challenges they face, where critical faculties decline to the point where citizens cannot distinguish between reliable and unreliable information, where democratic decision-making becomes impossible because voters lack the knowledge needed to evaluate policy options meaningfully. We live in the world he warned about, where awesome technological powers exist in the hands of leaders who may not understand them, where the public has lost the ability to hold those leaders accountable for scientific policy decisions, where superstition and pseudoscience flourish while real scientific understanding declines. But Sagan also understood something crucial. This dangerous future was not inevitable. Human beings are naturally inclined toward scientific thinking when given proper encouragement and education. Children are born curious, eager to explore, naturally experimental in their approach to understanding the world around them. The scientific method is not an artificial imposition on human nature. It is a systematic development of our natural capacities for observation, experimentation, and logical reasoning. The problem is not that humans are incapable of scientific thinking, but that our educational and media systems have failed to nurture and develop these natural capacities. The solution requires what Sagan called a course correction in how we approach scientific education and public engagement with science. Instead of treating science as a collection of facts to be memorized, we need to teach it as a way of thinking, to be practiced. Instead of presenting scientific conclusions as dogmas to be accepted, we need to show how those conclusions were reached through evidence and reasoning. Instead of hiding the uncertainty and complexity that real science involves, we need to help people understand that acknowledging uncertainty is how we move toward greater reliability, not away from it. This kind of scientific literacy is not just an academic luxury. It is an urgent practical necessity for any civilization that wants to survive its own technological power. Climate change, pandemic diseases, nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering. Every major challenge facing our species requires citizens capable of thinking scientifically about complex issues, evaluating evidence objectively, and making informed decisions about technological policies that will shape the future of human civilization. The stakes could not be higher. We are living through what may be the most critical period in human history, when our technological capabilities have grown powerful enough to reshape planetary systems, while our wisdom has lagged dangerously behind our power. The next few decades will determine whether we develop the scientific literacy and cosmic perspective needed to navigate these challenges successfully, or whether we join the countless civilizations that may have failed this same test elsewhere in the galaxy. As we stand at the crossroads that Carl Sagan predicted we would eventually reach, we face a choice that will determine not just the future of human civilization, but potentially the future of consciousness itself in our corner of the universe. We can continue down the path toward the dangerous future he warned about, a world where technological power grows while wisdom declines, where scientific illiteracy makes democratic decision-making impossible, where superstition and pseudoscience guide policy about existential challenges. Or we can choose the harder but infinitely more rewarding path toward becoming the scientifically literate, cosmically aware species that our technological capabilities demand we become. The choice is not just collective but deeply personal. Every time you choose curiosity over comfortable certainty, evidence over convenient belief, nuanced understanding over simple answers, you are helping to steer human civilization away from the abyss that Sagan saw approaching. Every time you take the effort to understand how vaccines work, instead of trusting social media posts about them, every time you learn about climate science, instead of accepting politically convenient denial, every time you think critically about claims, instead of accepting them because they confirm what you already believe, you are participating in humanity's attempt to develop the wisdom needed to match our technological power. But individual choices, while necessary, are not sufficient. The dangerous future Sagan warned about can only be avoided through collective action to rebuild scientific literacy as a foundation of democratic society. This means transforming how we teach science in schools, moving away from memorization of facts toward cultivation of scientific thinking skills. It means supporting media systems that prioritize accuracy over engagement, depth over sensationalism, evidence over opinion. It means creating public spaces where complex scientific issues can be discussed with the nuance and care they require, rather than being reduced to political talking points or tribal identities. Most importantly, it means recognizing that scientific literacy is not optional for citizens of a technological civilization. It is as essential as reading and writing were for citizens of a literary civilization. You cannot meaningfully participate in democratic decisions about climate policy without understanding atmospheric physics. You cannot make informed choices about medical treatments without grasping how clinical trials work. You cannot evaluate artificial intelligence safety proposals without understanding how machine learning systems actually function. You cannot vote responsibly on nuclear energy policies without comprehending radiation, nuclear physics, and risk assessment. This is not to say that every citizen needs to become a professional scientist, but that every citizen needs to develop enough scientific literacy to engage meaningfully with the scientific dimensions of public policy issues. This means understanding how scientific knowledge is created, how evidence is evaluated, how uncertainty is handled, how scientific consensus develops, and how to distinguish between reliable and unreliable sources of scientific information. These are not advanced technical skills, they are basic citizenship skills for the 21st century. The good news is that this transformation is entirely possible. Humans are naturally curious, naturally experimental, naturally inclined toward the kind of thinking that science systematizes and refines. Children approach the world with exactly the kind of wonder and questioning that drives scientific discovery. The challenge is not to implant foreign ways of thinking, but to nurture and develop the scientific instincts that humans naturally possess. When science education focuses on encouraging these natural capacities rather than suppressing them with rote memorization, students respond with enthusiasm and engagement. The cosmic perspective that Sagan championed provides both the motivation and the framework for this transformation. When you truly understand that you are made of atoms forged in stellar furnaces, that you are part of an evolutionary process that has been unfolding for billions of years, that you are participating in the universe's attempt to understand itself through consciousness, the scientific worldview becomes not just intellectually compelling, but emotionally inspiring. Science is not the enemy of wonder. It is wonder's greatest ally, revealing depths of beauty and meaning that surpass anything our ancestors could have imagined. This perspective also provides the humility necessary for genuine scientific thinking. When you grasp the vast scales of space and time within which human existence unfolds, when you understand the incredible complexity of the natural systems that sustain life, when you realize how much we still don't know about the universe we're part of, arrogance becomes impossible and dogmatism becomes ridiculous. The cosmic perspective naturally generates the kind of intellectual humility that allows for learning, growth, and change of mind based on new evidence. But perhaps most importantly, the cosmic perspective provides hope. Yes, we face enormous challenges as a species. Yes, we have made mistakes that threaten our future. Yes, the dangerous future Sagan warned about has partly come to pass, but we are also the products of an evolutionary process that has overcome seemingly impossible obstacles before. We are the descendants of organisms that survived mass extinctions, ice ages, volcanic catastrophes, and countless other challenges. We carry within our DNA and our culture the accumulated wisdom of billions of years of problem-solving, adaptation, and survival. More than that, we are the first species in Earth's history to understand these connections, to see the big picture, to grasp both our vulnerabilities and our capabilities. We know enough about planetary systems to understand how human activities are changing them, and we have developed technologies that could allow us to live sustainably within Earth systems. We understand enough about cooperation and coordination to organize effective responses to global challenges, and we have communication tools that could help us work together across traditional boundaries. We have learned enough about learning itself to educate populations effectively, and we have educational technologies that could make scientific literacy accessible to everyone. The future is not predetermined. We still have time to choose wisdom over willful ignorance, evidence over ideology, long-term thinking over short-term convenience. We can still build the kind of civilization that would make Carl Sagan proud, one that uses scientific understanding to reduce suffering and increase wonder for all living beings, one that explores the cosmos while caring for its planetary home, one that develops technological power guided by cosmic wisdom. If this vision speaks to something deep within you, if you recognize that the challenges we face require both scientific literacy and cosmic perspective, then you've found your community here among fellow cosmic citizens, working to build the future that Sagan believed we were capable of creating. Subscribe not just to stay informed, but to stay connected with others who understand that science and wonder, evidence and hope, cosmic humility and human responsibility all work together in the great project of conscious evolution. Share in the comments what gives you hope that we might still avoid the dangerous future Sagan warned about, what steps you're taking to cultivate scientific thinking in your own life, and what topics you'd like us to explore as we continue this crucial conversation about humanity's cosmic future. The universe is counting on us to get this right.